listening to the podcast Advertising Playbook, your resource to better understand and execute successful podcast ad campaigns. Hello and welcome to the podcast Advertising Playbook. I'm your host, Heather Osgood. Over the course of the month of July, I am going to be presenting in the podcast a series of what I am thinking of a bit of a masterclass around podcast advertising. So we're going to be producing 4 episodes, and in each of these episodes, I'm going to be covering a different part of the podcast advertising journey, the planning, the purchasing, the execution. So I hope that it's going to be very helpful for you. I'm excited to put it together. And so let's get started with our first episode in this masterclass on podcast advertising. So first and foremost, it's really important that whenever you do anything in life, in my opinion, that you start with your goals. What is the goals of the campaign? When you think about the goals of the campaign, that is something that is really going to be the foundation, the springboard, where you are coming from and where you would like to be. So it's a really important piece of the overall campaign. If you don't know where you're at and you don't know where you want to get to, it's hard to say if you've actually arrived, right? And so as you think about starting podcast advertising or even creating a new campaign within podcast advertising, first you want to start with those goals. Now, what could the goals of the campaign be? In podcast advertising, we find that a large percentage of our advertisers are still direct response advertisers. What that means is that advertisers are running ads with the assumption, the presumption, the hope, the plan that they are going to get direct sales conversions from the ads that they run. If you are going to be running ads and you want to know that the cash register is ringing every time you run ads, then you are looking at a direct response campaign. And as we go through the process, I will talk more about direct response campaigns and how you can set them up so that you know if they're actually working or not. But it's important to establish out the gate what that plan is. Do you want direct response? The other might be that you are interested in brand advertising. Now, of course, even brand campaigns are going to have KPIs. You're going to need to determine what does success look like for your company. Often when we think about brand advertising, though, it's really about this idea of creating awareness that your company exists. And I think especially we tend to get a lot of, I would call kind of mid-level businesses advertising and podcasting. And I think there are a lot of different reasons that those mid-level companies are gravitating towards podcast ads. But part of it is that you can create this really favorable association with your brand. The hard part about it, though, is that if people don't know that your company exists, then they're not going to purchase products from you, right? Especially if you're a direct-to-consumer brand. So if you have created a great product, you've created a great website, and now you're at a place where you're like, hey, I need traffic on my site. I need people who are going to come to my site and purchase products. The only way that people are going to purchase products from you is if they know you exist. So how can we create that environment where people know that you exist? And when we just think about the ABCs of marketing, obviously, first people need to have some sort of a need, and then they have to be aware that your company exists to make that buying decision. So while direct response advertising can be very enticing, especially for companies that are newer, it can also be a double-edged sword a bit, right? Because if people don't know that your company exists at all, it may be difficult for them to make a buying decision. My recommendation as you're starting any campaign is to consider the benefits of the brand that is happening and the branding that is happening for your company as your company is being exposed out there, right? And that could be with podcast advertising, it could be with social media, it could be with SEO, right? Like there's all kinds of different ways that you can get exposure for your company and your brand. Podcast ads may just be one of them. But establishing that brand and being able to create a name for your company is important. And so whether or not your goal is direct response, and knowing that if you spent $1,000 that you're getting, $1,000 back, or maybe $1,500 back, you're still getting awareness for your company regardless. But go into your campaign knowing exactly what your goals are and knowing exactly what a win looks like for you. And you may decide, as an established company, maybe you already have parameters for trying out a new channel. And, maybe you're going to go into this new channel with those parameters already in place. One thing I can't overemphasize enough, though, is that if this is your first time running podcast ads, there is going to be a learning period for you, right? Just like the first time that you did SEO, and the first time that you did social media, and the first time that maybe you did traditional TV, radio, OTT, CTV, right? All of these different things. When you try a new channel, you have to test it out and you have to see what is going to work. And so my recommendation always is to make that your number one goal, at least of the first campaign that you run. So what does that learning process look like? And that learning may include things like, who should you buy ads from, right? Like, how do you buy ads in podcasting? Are you going to buy those ads directly from the show? Are you going to buy those ads through a network or a representation firm? Are you going to a larger partner where you want to buy them in a more transactional manner? Are you going, on Spotify and you want to upload an announcer read ad? Or are you doing things like maybe going on to different channels where you can just do a transactional buy on their website, right? There are lots of different ways that you can buy podcast ads. And so that could be your very first goal, is how can I best buy the podcast ads? And how can I buy podcast ads in a way that I'm going to get the results that I'm looking for, right? So that's a really big, important piece, is how are you getting the results that you're looking for? And maybe you find that when you work directly with the podcast, or when you work directly with a network or a rep firm, that you're getting a better connection. And because of that connection, the results for your campaign are better because the selection process is better, right? So that would be the first goal that I would establish, is how do you want to best buy podcast ads? And of course, there are different ways, as we just discussed, but there are different types of ads as well. Do you want to run host-read endorsement type ads? Would you prefer to run announcer-read programmatic ads? What are the kind of the parameters that you're looking for? So those would be two places that I would really explore. And then in terms of learning, I think it's also really important to consider the genres that you're advertising in, right? So perhaps you're trying a variety of different genres and you find that conservative talk is super effective, or maybe you find that health and fitness works really well for your brand. Maybe you find that comedy converts better than true crime, right? So understanding the types of genres that you're going to be targeting and what is going to convert best for you. The other thing that you might learn in the process is that personal experience piece is really important. So perhaps you find that when someone's actually gotten the product and tried the product and their ad read is done super well and it's really convincing, that you see better results than perhaps a campaign where it feels like the host maybe phoned in the ad read, or maybe they didn't want to try the product out ahead of time. So those are all really important elements that you want to learn about. And then, of course, you're going to want to learn about how are you tracking your results? What has worked best for you? Are people using a promo code? Do you find that other elements like a pixel tracking is going to work better, or can you use them in conjunction with one another? Of course, as you're approaching your campaign, you want to establish goals, but my number one recommendation for you is that you learn about the channel and you learn about how it's going to work best for you. Other goals that you might have for your campaign is really just looking at ways that you're going to use podcasting overall. And what I mean by that is you could use podcasting for advertising, right? And obviously here on this show, that's what we're talking about, is the power of advertising. But you might also find that when you're able to do interviews with hosts in conjunction with your ads that you see a much better return, because people are able to hear an interview with maybe the founder or maybe, someone high up in the organization that's really pivotal to your product. So that can be a good way. Maybe you've decided that you want to have your own podcast and you have a branded show that you've created. How can you leverage that brand, that branded podcast in conjunction with ads and interviews and different things that you're doing? So as you're exploring podcast advertising, as you're thinking about really starting that first campaign, my recommendation for you is to make sure that you start with the end in mind, right? Make sure you create those goals and determine what success is going to look like for your company. At the end of this campaign that you're running, how are you going to know if it worked or if it didn't work? So that's really super important. So for this first episode, that is going to be my call to you, my plea to you is, before you start a campaign, make sure that you're clear on the goals and what you're trying to accomplish with that campaign. All right, that's it for today's episode. Please make sure that you tune in to the following episodes, because we are going to walk through this. We're going to break it down. We're going to look at how to create a successful podcast ad campaign. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you again on the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Podcast Advertising Playbook, your source to a better understanding of the podcast advertising industry.